Last week we compared the experience of Mass on the internet with the experience of Mass celebrated in times of religious persecution. And we concluded that our present day viewing of private Masses inside empty churches, though somewhat sad and lonely, is nothing compared to the fear and the uncertainty in the lives of those who gathered in secret to receive Holy Communion under threat of torture and death. I don't know about you, but I can only stand in slack-jaw admiration of their love for Christ. Now, sometimes it's good to remember that the power of the Mass is a lot deeper than what we normally realize given our normal experience of, well, a Sunday Mass or a First Communion Mass or a wedding Mass or even a funeral Mass. And here's an example of what I'm talking about. A couple of days ago, a friend of mine in Amarillo sent me an email. He had listened to last week's homily on the internet, and he said that comparing today's Masses on the internet with clandestine Masses celebrated in times of persecution and war brought to his mind Masses that he attended as a young sailor 40 years ago. And this is what he wrote. It was 1962, the height of the Cold War. I was stationed aboard an aircraft carrier in the Western Pacific. Operations ran 24/7, and among the routine operations included the launching of aircraft. Now get this. The launch of an aircraft involved catapulting planes that weighed 60,000 pounds from dead stop to a speed of 130 miles per hour in a distance of 220 feet. There were two of these catapults, one on each side of the forward area of the flight deck. Pistons retracted the heavy chains and cables that launched the planes, and you can only imagine the noise. Now imagine having Mass in a metal room under that flight deck, smack dab in the middle of those two catapults. The catapult to the right would launch with a loud swish-ka-thump, followed by the snarling cables retracting louder than a freight train, and huge pistons hissing like giant snakes. There'd be a slight pause, maybe a minute, before the left catapult would fire. Swoosh-ka-thump, followed again by the whip of the retracting gear. And the sequence would repeat over and over again. On top of all this was the ship's motion. At times, the elevation of the sacred host was at the top of a wave, other times at the bottom of a wave. Through it all, we sailors hung on until the chaplain bestowed his final blessing. Not your typical Sunday Mass. It reminds me of a quote by a famous author and convert to Catholicism named Annie Dillard. She wrote, "Why do people in church seem like cheerful, brainless tourists on a packaged tour of the Holy Land? Does anyone have the foggiest idea of what power we blithely invoke inside a church? Or, as I suspect, does no one believe a word of it? The churches are children playing on the floor with their chemistry sets, mixing up a batch of TNT. It's madness to wear ladies' straw hats and velvet hats to church. We should all be wearing crash helmets. Ushers should issue life preservers and signal flares. They should lash us to our pews. The sleeping God may wake up someday and take offense, haul us off to a place from which we can never return." Again, that's not our typical experience of a typical Sunday Mass. Friends, today is Palm Sunday, and today's Mass is not your typical Sunday Mass. Today, we do not read passages about children or sheep or fields of wheat. Rather, we read the Passion of Christ. Like sailors on an aircraft carrier, we can't ignore the metallic bang of artillery, the explosive percussion of war. Yes, war. On the gibbet of the cross. The Son of God opening his mouth in a silent scream of agony. What will it take for us to realize that the execution that took place on Calvary is the essence of every Mass. God's sacrifice of his Son, his only Son. Today, we stare slack-jawed at Christ on the cross. Like those sailors on a ship, gazing at the elevation of the sacred host, we see him rising and falling on the waves of history. His distended stomach, like the swollen stomach of every child who ever died starving in his mother's arms. Stripped of his garments, we glimpse in Christ's naked body the shocking reality of every rape and sexual sin. On his busted up face, we stare at the stream of blood that has drenched all the battlefields, back alleys, and prison yards of all of history. No, this is not your typical Sunday. This is Passion Sunday. Grab your helmet. This is war. God's war against evil in all of its forms.